there's no reason why you should say we've got to slow the growth of Social Security benefits in order to reduce the deficit.
Continued reaction today from Democrats to the president's budget proposal, directing their ire on his proposed cuts to Social Security through the embrace of chained CPI. The president's cuts to Social Security in the name of deficit reduction have been the focus of a lot of the discussion surrounding the budget. We talked about it here last night. And much of the reaction from Democrats and progressives has been a kind of palpable sense of betrayal, a sense the president has finally done it, finally caved. But if you take a moment and zoom out, this, as in austerity, is what's been happening across the world over the past 5 years. Massive financial crisis, followed by bailouts, followed by deficits, followed by austerity, followed by revolt. And that cycle, that path, has been trod by liberal governments and conservative governments alike. In fact, one of the most grim ironies of the crisis age, an irony that Barack Obama is now part of, is that center-left governments across the world have been the ones to turn around and impose austerity, sometimes brutal austerity, on their own bases, who do not want it. And nowhere in the world was that austerity been more violently resisted or more dramatically disastrous than in Greece. Implicated right at the center of this spectacle of human suffering is former Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou, who was elected as part of a center-left coalition. But to meet targets demanded by the EU to get bailed out, he oversaw massive and truly devastating austerity cuts. Under his leadership, pensions were cut by up to 40%. 30,000 government workers were laid off. Taxes were raised several times. GDP growth contracted from 0% in 2008 and negative 7% in 2011. And the unemployment rate rose to 17.7% and 40% for young people. An austerity regime so blunt and so unpopular, it ultimately brought down his government. Joining me tonight, George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece and current president of the Socialist International. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for coming.
It's great to be here.
So I wanted to have you here because we're having a budget discussion here in the U.S. And there are many, many, many differences between the U.S. and Greece, which I would like to talk about.
And some similarities.
And some similarities. And the first place I want to start off is the politics. I mean, you had to do this, right? The politics of being from the center left, having a coalition and a base of support that wants things like pensions and higher wages and social spending, and then getting in power and having to turn around and implement cuts that go after those very things. What was that like doing that in Greece?
Well, it was very difficult. But first of all, I think one of the similarities is that we took over from conservative governments here in the United States. It was actually the Democrats here that had a balanced budget. And I took over from a conservative government, and they ran up this deficit. So I had to deal with this huge deficit. And I had to deal with the markets, too. And the markets were really pounding on Greece. They wanted to see...
they were asking for blood.
They were asking for blood. And this is where, of course, not only Greece, but the European Union could have said, listen, sit down, we guarantee Greek bonds, let Greece make reforms, because, of course, we had to deal with the symptoms called the deficits. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. But I was able to deal with that. We didn't go bankrupt. That was going to be. You could die from symptoms. We didn't go bankrupt. We didn't leave the euro. We had to take difficult measures, but we wanted to go into deeper issues of how we make our economy sustainable. Greece has great potential. That's where I think Europe made wrong decisions as far as imposing too harsh austerity, and not only on Greece, but as a European-wide policy. And that, of course, was part of a policy which I had to follow in order to make sure that Greece stayed inside the euro and did not go bankrupt.
You talked about these similarities, and in terms of inheriting a balance sheet that was bequeathed to you by a center-right party, a center-right coalition that was actually wildly out of whack, right? One of the things that happens in American political context is Greece is a watchword on the American right. Because basically the idea is Greece was essentially a people that tried to basically lazily expand their welfare state. They blew up the entire country, and then they went bankrupt, and then they had crisis. And I want to take a look, because this is what conservatives say the U.S. is and is becoming. And I want
which I disagree with.
Yes, I want you to respond to that.
Okay,
right after you take a look.
good.
Congressman Darrell Issa now warning if Congress doesn't take on spending, the country will go into a downward slide to make us like Greece.
What I'm looking for is to save Medicare and Social Security in the country from becoming Greece.
We look like Greece within 3 years.
That alone makes us look a lot like Greece.
That puts us on a path to becoming Greece. The country's going to burn.
What do you think of that?
Well, I would say that the Republicans made the U.S. look more like Greece. The conservatives made made the mess in Greece, and we're mopping up the mess. We have to deal with this crisis. Secondly, it's not the welfare state in Greece that was the problem. It was more of a crony kind of a capitalism, more of a clientelistic kind of a capitalism, where business and government were colluding to spend money in ways which helped, obviously, the richer, not necessarily the poor.
Interests.
I'm not saying that we didn't have to revamp our pension system. I'm not saying we didn't have to, be careful. But there, for example, I'll give you just an example. We had collusion of big pharmaceutical companies with doctors. There was corruption. They were giving extravagant medical prescriptions. We put everything online, despite the resistance of the doctors. They didn't want to use computers. We forced them, and we cut by 30% the medical bills. Now, that means that, that's good governance. So we need good governance, and that was the problem in Greece. It wasn't the welfare system. As a matter of fact, Brookings Institute comes out and says, if we were transparent and were able to hit tax evasion as, let's say, a country like in Sweden or the Scandinavians, we would gain 8% GDP. Now, that's not austerity. That is good governance. That's what we need.
One of the things that's happened in the wake of your government collapsing, and this is a really important thing, is the rise of a fascist party in Greece called Golden Dawn. I want to play some video of this. Do we have this video? Yes, we do. There it is. This is Golden Dawn marching through a market, smashing kiosks and demanding the papers of immigrant workers. 40 burly men led by Georgios Jimenez, a lawmaker with the right-wing Golden Dawn party, marching through a night market in the town of Rafina, demanding dark-skinned merchants show their permits. This has come out of the rubble of the ruins of the crisis in Greece. And when I look at this, it's terrifying, because we all know about the rise of fascism in Europe in previous eras. What do you make of this?
Well, first of all, one of my first laws was an immigration law, which gave migrants that were staying in Greece the capability to become Greek citizens, or if they were born there also. So there was a reaction by some of the ultra right-wing parties. But I stayed the course on that. Secondly, this crisis has done two things. One is that, of course, there's huge unemployment because of the austerity, and I think this is where we would have wanted, in Europe-wide, to have a more humane and long-term consolidation of the budget rather than sort of deep cuts to be able to make the reforms. And secondly, we need just that sense of empowerment of our citizens. Now, these people feel disempowered, and they think that following a dogma, a leader, a neo-fascist party, that they're getting power. That's, of course, an illusion. But it's terrible, and it's scapegoating where the real problems are.
You talked about balance. You can a kind of way of projecting the budget in which you aren't imposing deep cuts, but you're getting towards balance in the future. That's the promise the president has made with his budget. I want to talk about whether that promise can be achieved. We're going to bring some other people in discussion right after this.